Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I just want to say again just how amazing it is to have this experience of fullness and beauty and song, and even when the instruments stop, that the whole kahal lives in the space. It's just deeply, deeply moving, and it's a feeling we haven't had for so long and not to be taken for granted. If you see me on the street, I won't have glasses. I don't wear glasses most of the time, except up here and in meetings when I find myself not being able to see the people across the way. And it's not atypical, and this happened just the other day in the park while I was walking my dog, that I knew the person far away, but as they got closer, I still didn't know, and it took a while until, and I have to say, I don't have my glasses on, and because they're like, so, and then there's a moment when you know who it is. And I think we've all experienced that also during COVID with masks. Like, we see in the eyes that there's some recognition, but we don't actually know. And I've also found that sometimes people that I had only met during COVID and they took off their mask, I didn't think they looked that way. You know, it's like what the ambiguity does to our sense of knowing. And in this week's parasha, there's a notion of vision that is at the beginning of the parasha that is gradual. The parasha opens Vayera with God appearing, Vayera, to Avraham. And then it says, Vayera alav Adonai ba'alonei mamreh, v'hu yoshev petach ha'ohel kechom hayom Adon. God appeared to him, meaning him, by the terebinths Avraham, although some people say it was to the entire Jewish people, which is why it doesn't say Avraham himself. And he was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the day grew hot. And the next pasuk, Vayisa einav, and he lifted up his eyes, Vayar, and he saw. V'hinei shlosha anashim nitzavim alav, and there were 3 men standing upon him, on him, Vayar, and he saw again. And so, of course, because of the principle, there's no extra language in the Torah, the commentators are very curious as to why it keeps on saying, he lifted up his eyes, they saw, he saw, they saw. What is it that he didn't see the first time around? Is it like me with the glasses from far away without the glasses? And so the commentators fill in the gaps. And some of the things they say are, Sforno says, when it says Vayisa einav, when he lifted up his eyes, he concentrated on seeing more clearly. And we know that feeling, like we look and then we have to pay attention. It's a notion of focusing. And then Rabbeinu Bachya says about it, he raised his eyes and saw. At this point, he only had a dim vision of someone approaching. And then it says the 3 men already were on top of him. And at this point, the Torah repeats the word Vayar, he saw, as only now did Abraham see these people close up. At this point, he also realized that they were angels. So we may know this story, and typically the famous midrash that is a deeply moving midrash, actually from Genesis Rabbi, which Rashi quotes as well, says that these 3 men were not men at all. They were not anashim. They were angels. And they each had a mission, right? One was there to announce the birth to Sarah that she would have a son, which she had been barren all this time. One to overthrow Sodom, that would make the pronouncement that Sodom and Amorah would be destroyed. And one to do Bikor Cholim, because Abraham, just at the end of last week's parasha, had his Brit Milah, and he was still healing. And then says the Midrash, and Rashi quotes it, that for one angel does not carry out 2 missions, which is why there were 3 angels and 3 missions. But what I often overlook, because I love that midrash so much, is what it took for him to get to see the angels. 3 times seeing, trying to figure out what was before him. He saw, he focused, and then he saw deeply. Just in many ways, like how we understand the story of Moshe and the burning bush, he had to turn to see the bush. It's not just our vision is blurry from a distance if we're not wearing glasses, but if we don't actually take the time to focus and see, we might never see the angel. We've been at a distance from each other for so long. We've been masked. Some of us are still masked. And we're squinting, I think, often to try to see one another. And what a gift to be able to be together, and those of us even who are afar and in their own homes or who couldn't make it here because they're not well enough or they had other issues that kept them afar. We want to see you because in some way, if we can't see one another, we won't see what's divine in each other. It's a progression to be able to take the time to look, to find the angel in each of us. Now, of course, the Midrash says that the angels had a mission each. We luckily can have more than one mission in our life, thankfully. And we feel deeply that we have a collective mission as a community to restore what it means to see the angel in each of us. Because when we can't see that, we're deficient in the world, and the world is deficient of that kind of vision. And we've been living in a world very deficient of vision, with so much unrest and violence and pain and illness and war. And as I looked at this parasha, and I saw, that's what stood out for me this Shabbat, today, is that sometimes it's not only the physical distance that allows us to come closer and to see, but one of the gifts of a Shabbat like this, of being together, is to actually look a little more closely, to spend a little more time, to live into the 25 hours of Shabbat, to say, I know something about what makes you like an angel. Because community is filled with angels, doing mitzvot for one another, caring for one another, sitting at tables to welcome in one another, to set up tables upstairs, to be downstairs, to make calls, to pay shiva calls. It's all the mitzvot that actually Steinsaltz says the mitzvot are the angels released from people to send into the world. And when we're together like this, and Shabbat gives us that gift, is to remind us that not only are we on a mission to be angels and to release that kind of divinity into the world, but when we can see the power of what it means to have a community filled with that kind of divinity, maybe the world does not look as bad because we know we can get it to be something else. So I bless us on the Shabbat. I hope many of you will stay here during the course of the entire Shabbat, not sleep here. That we make sure that we see everyone. Sometimes when it's crowded, we pass people by. I just passed Yair by, who's here from Israel, as I was running to do something else. It's like often that we just pass people by. We don't want to be that kind of community. We want to be a community that stops and sees and lifts our eyes and sees again and says, you are divine. And together, we are divine.